idea behind it.
How are you?
you?
I always forget to do my
expecting
mileage
more.
things.
I do too. I probably got
3 miles.
Verbatim.
You're worse than me. I've never, I might be 2 weeks late, but I've never.
Good morning and welcome to the Berry County Committee of the Whole meeting for April 2nd, 2024. If you'd please stand for our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please be seated. Reports from state and county officials. If there are any state or county officials that would like to address the board. In those fine new uniforms.
Yeah, these are the fatigue pants. I thought I'd bring them up there. They got the extra pockets and everything in them for the guys that work in the road. Plus, it's called a ripstop material. So you have to go through the pucker brush, what we do periodically, then it doesn't tear them all up and doesn't snag and have to replace them. The old pants we had were probably about $150 a pair. The old light brown with the dark brown. These are a lot more reasonably priced. So we'll see how long they last. Anyways, I was asked by a couple of commissioners here to talk about this resolution that I think, well, I got 2 of them here. I think one is yours, Dave. Is that correct? Is that on the agenda today? Okay, all right, so let's make sure. But anyways, there's a couple of corrections I wanted to make on here. First of all, and what I'll do is I'll just give you the one I've got when I'm done, Dave. That work? And then it says, whereas the Berry County, the commissioners of Berry County took an oath to support the United States Constitution, including the Second Amendment, and Article 1, Section 6 of the state constitution that provides every person has a right to keep arms for defense of himself and of the state. Well, when they refer to the state, on this one here, on the state, when they refer to the state of Michigan, when they say states in the Second Amendment, they're actually referring to the United States federal government there. And that's in a Heller case. I can't remember if it was the Heller case? Okay, yes. So anyways, so it says a well-regulated militia being necessary, and it's the only time in any constitution the word necessary is used. And to the security of a free state, and that's what I'm referring to. The free state is the United States as a whole. And this one, when you see the one in the article in Section 6, they're referring to the state of Michigan. Am I clear on it? Okay. Then you got, whereas all elected officials in Berry County, including the sheriff and prosecuting attorney, I put down, whereas all elected servants in Berry County took the same oath not to only support both constitutions, but to faithfully discharge the duties of their said offices. And you had something similar down here. I gotta find it here. Anyways, what I did is I shortened it up right there. And then, let's see. The Berry County Board of Commissioners opposed any legislation that will infringe upon the constitutional rights of the people. We don't have constitutional rights. You guys got to understand it. We have natural rights. What the Constitution does, it tells government, no, you can't infringe on these natural rights. So what the Second Amendment did is it recognized, one, the need for a militia. It also recognized the fact that the militia already exists. And it also recognized that you have a natural right to keep and bear arms. And it's obviously for that militia purposes, which would, in our area here, at the local level here, would be a posse. That's under the Posse Comitatus laws. So basically, Posse Comitatus is the power of the county. There's a case from 1972. It was Baltimore versus Silver that refers to that. And what it was is right after the 60s riots, there was a business owner by the name of Silver who sued the city of Baltimore for not doing enough to protect his business because the business was destroyed. The city of Baltimore tried saying, well, it was a riot, there was nothing we could do. The Maryland Supreme Court said, well, you had the power of the Posse Comitatus and you didn't use it, you're responsible for damages. So just be aware, there's stuff out there like that, because the position I'm in, I get fed this periodically. And I think it's important you guys understand how important these positions are. So if we can do something about infringing upon the constitutional rights of the people, but maybe the natural rights, protected by the Constitution. Something like that. That'd be very helpful. Other than that, is there anything you and I discussed? Oh, I'm sorry, yeah. Don't be afraid to use the unalienable or unalienable rights, because what that means is these rights, we can't put a lien on them. We can't even temporarily put a lien on your rights, and that's what I mean by unalienable or unalienable. We can't alienate you from these rights. So I put that in there on... Oh, here we are. Whereas to faithfully discharge their duties, Berry County Board of Commissioners oppose any legislative action that would infringe upon the unalienable rights to keep and bear arms for the people in Berry County. And I think that was pretty much it that I was going to add to that. Other than that, I thought you guys did a pretty good job of putting it together.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Wait, so what section are you referring to in that last one?
Let's see. Right, let's see.
Where,
We got paragraph 1, I think I got that one covered, 2, and then 3, whereas the Berry County Board of Commissioners oppose any legislation that will infringe upon constitutional rights of the people.
okay, you're changing that to, you would like natural
Or
people protected by the Constitution.
Yep.
But the last thing you said,
Trying to get you guys all on the same page, I guess. Am I making sense? You don't look like it.
okay, so that's, yeah, because I was looking for where that was in ours.
No, no,
So that's in yours.
Yeah, for paragraph 3, I did a paragraph 3. And do you want to see it?
Could you read the whole thing, your paragraph out?
All right, this is for your paragraph 3. I'll read yours first. This is whereas the Berry County Board of Commissioners is opposed to any legislation that will infringe upon the constitutional rights of the people. And right is, whereas to faithfully discharge their duties, the Berry County Board of Commissioners oppose any legislative action that would infringe upon the unalienable rights to keep and bear arms for the people in Berry County.
Okay, so, but you had previously said upon the natural rights of people protected by the Constitution.
Yes, I did.
is
I put that down on the next one here. I didn't get to that one yet.
Is that one acceptable to you?
Oh, it's acceptable to you. You're the ones voting
Yeah,
yes.
I was just, okay. I was just taking the input.
Got it. And I'll hand this to, do you want me to hand it to you, Dave? Okay. And then, where you get to the natural rights, whereas Berry County Board of Commissioners oppose any attempt to a legislature to infringe upon the natural, any right that is natural or enumerated to the people in Berry County. And that's your Bill of Rights plus your Article 1 is your Declaration of Rights in Michigan's Constitution. That's what that's referring to. Anyways, any questions on that one?
Nope. If you give me your notes, we'll
Absolutely.
review, incorporate, delay, pause.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
And those are just a suggestion. I'm not going to be offended if you red marked it or highlighted or whatever. I'm not going to be offended at all on it, okay?
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Additional reports from state or county officials.
Oh, the one point he makes is here that's useful.
Okay, moving ahead, limited public comment. At this time, any member of the public wishing to address the board may do so for up to 3 minutes.
Is that amended? Okay.
One nation under God. Gary White, I'm a resident of a nation where courageous men have authored a document, the United States Constitution, where they have openly spoken that if caught, they would be hanged. I'm also from the village of Nashville. Today, the entire room, I believe, recited the Pledge of Allegiance, including those words, one nation under God. Our country was founded as a God-fearing country and grew into one of the greatest countries ever. Men and women have fought for our freedoms under the oaths to the Constitution. 1.2 million soldiers have made the ultimate sacrifice defending our great country and its freedoms. Abraham Lincoln, quote, once wrote, quote, It is for those honored dead that we take increased devotion to the cause for which they gave their last full measure of devotion, that we highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain. That is, that this nation under God shall have a birth of freedom, that government of the people shall not perish from earth, unquote. To pass a strong resolution to the Democrat attack on our Second Amendments is not only for the people of Berry County, but also for these soldiers. Any attack on our Constitution is attack on the people you represent. It cannot be tolerated. The one thing I would change in Sheriff Leaf's thing is when he said elected servants, I would definitely put elected officials. Servants do what they're told. You have duties, so I don't believe you're doing what you're told by people on a day-to-day basis, so I would change that. A couple meetings back, Commissioner Doster made a bold statement that probably no commissioners, this isn't a quote, but general, that no commissioner has probably even read the Constitution.
State Constitution.
Pardon me?
State Constitution.
State Constitution. Okay. You must be correct, as no one has challenged his statement. So I'm wondering, if you read the state constitution, it actually gives you your duties as elected officials. I think it's in Article 4. So that's a big concern, I guess. On a tax allocation agenda item, county property taxes are spiraling out of control. The presentation I presented on Thursday on property tax revenues show that this board needs to cease requesting tax millages and manage the finances of the people to fulfill state constitutional mandates such as a jail before monies are spent on unmandated projects. I'll be back for further.
Thank you. Additional public comment?
Good morning. It's good to see all your smiling faces this morning.
And yours as well.
Yeah, right. First off, I'd like to continue to thank Mike, John, and Bob for being proactive in showing leadership in attempting to get the Second Amendment issue done. Now, this is also from a statement. I did quite a few background checks in the last week. In a statement sent to the Livingston Daily earlier this month, and this is from 2020, when they first passed a resolution pertaining to the Second Amendment, okay? The Michigan State Attorney General Office said, and I quote, "Sheriffs have a right to discretion. Every sheriff throughout our state is a duly elected law enforcement authority within their community, chosen by the voters of their community. As such, they have the right to discretion in that role as to what laws they will enforce and which they choose not to, with the resources available to the department. Now, if they choose not to enforce the laws to prevent gun violence, avoidable injury, and death, that's a decision for their voters to evaluate. These decisions will ultimately be judged by the voters in their county." Student in our lane is a statement that I've heard frequently pertaining to the Second Amendment issue. We have 55 Michigan counties evidently do not have an issue with staying in their lane. They have passed Second Amendment resolutions ranging from Second Amendment sanctuary to supporting the Constitution. Oh, by the way, 38 of these counties are Second Amendment sanctuary counties. Those 55 counties evidently also didn't have any legal issues with incorporating resolutions. On January 4th, a letter to the banner by Dave Lasma about government overreach explains the necessity for such a resolution. 4 commissioners last year voted for a resolution at a Republican meeting. Now 2 oppose it. I consider that to be disingenuous. It'd be nice to have an attorney at a BOC meeting so the public can hear firsthand their concerns, rather than frankly getting it secondhand. Also, show me counties where gun violence has increased since such resolutions have been passed. I don't think you'll find any. My primary concern here is, let's just push this forward in some manner to the BOC, and let's finally have show the courage to have an up or down vote. I forgot my can. I was going to bring my can in here so we kick down the road a little bit more. Also, I hope all of you have read the Republican platform. I think you'll find it very insightful. Thank you for the stuttering and getting my time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Additional public comment?
I got to add to his comment there. You guys understand when you talk about law enforcement, it doesn't mean you've got to go out and arrest everybody who breaks the law or write everybody who was speeding. Enforcement just is the action of making, when I was a young deputy, I remember pulling over a guy one time because he had the headlight out. And as I'm walking up to his car, we're trained to look through the car, make sure there's nothing in there, nobody hiding down that's going to ambush us and all that stuff. And he was up back and he had his little gun case, and his gun was sitting on the back seat of his car. Technically, that's a felony. Okay, he could have been nailed for carrying a concealed weapon and all that. Well, I asked him about that gun, and he got in a big old panic, and he said, how's that at the range? I shut up on my ammo, and I was talking to my buddy afterwards, and we were there another at least 2 hours, and I forgot all about it. I said, okay. So I checked to make sure it was unloaded, and I put it in the case. I said, put it in your trunk. That's an enforcement action, folks. So it doesn't mean you have to take them and jam them up with felonies every time or jam you up with traffic citations all the time. These are all enforcement actions. When we show up on scene, we are in uniform, and that right there, the courts have already recognized that as being a type of force. That's the first step in force when we show up on scene. So kind of going off what you said over here about what the Attorney General was saying. So yeah, our job is to maintain peace in the community, and that's how we've done it my whole career. We're focused on maintaining peace, not jamming people up. So any questions on that? Plus, which time we got? All right. I helped the state of Washington, the sheriffs over there, because they were talking about taking away their ability to call in posses, and that's something that you just can't do. And so I sent them a whole bunch of stuff, and the reason why I'm going here is because we've had township boards. Those are constitutional offices, townships are. And there's court cases here just in Michigan alone that says you cannot come up with a board and overrule township offices when they are elected and constitutional offices. So what I'll do is I'll go grab that information and I'll get it right to you, and that hopefully we can use that to kind of shut down this bully pulpit we had down in Lansing, trying to bulldoze these solar, solar farms, are they calling them? I'm not sure what they're calling them. But the townships do have a leg to stand on in that. And it had to do with the Board of Education quite a while ago. They tried getting a committee to oversee the Board of Education, and the Supreme Court said, no, you can't do that. And there's another one there that had to do with the sheriffs, and the same thing. They said, no, you can't do that. So thank you.
Thank you. Additional public comment? Hearing none, we will move ahead with our agenda. Mishaya.
Good morning.
Good morning.
All right. So I'm here today to present the 2024 Berry County Equalization Report, which is required to occur in April, hence why I'm here today. Just as a reminder, the local assessors for each of the township and city finished their work and certified the assessment roll in March. They turn the assessment roll over to the Board of Review. That is an opportunity for taxpayers then to appeal their individual assessments, and once the Board of Review is done making any necessary adjustments or corrections, they turn their assessment roll over to me. So that usually happens in the last 2 weeks of March. Once I get those assessment rolls, I do a very thorough audit, and I audit many different things, but for the purposes of equalization, my concern is to ensure that all the townships have equalized at 50% of the market value in each of the classifications. And so I did that, and everybody equalized at 50%. There were no need to apply factors this year. And so I've compiled all the data into this report, and I'll be recommending that you guys approve the equalized values based on the data in this report. So I can go through the report. I'm not going to go through everything, so that way I don't bore you all to death, but I think the whole report is awesome, because I love numbers. But I'm just going to skip to page 7. And on page 7, it's just a comparison from 2023 to 2024. Just some things I wanted to point out. So the percent change in equalized value this year was 12.6%, and that's just an increase in the market value. I also include taxable value information in this report, but equalization is not concerned with taxable value, it's the assessed value. The reason I include it is because most people, including taxpayers, care more about the taxable value than assessed value. That's where we get our revenue, and that's what people are taxed on. So the data in here allows all the taxing entities to begin their budgeting process. You will see that the percent change in taxable value was 8.69% this year. That does not mean, and I wanted to clarify, that our tax revenue is going to increase by 8.69%. There's various reasons for that, the biggest one being Headley, which I'm not going to discuss today because I have to do that later on in a couple of months. So, but I just wanted to point that out. And you can see that there's been pretty consistent growth in the county between 8 and 10%, and the percent change in taxable value. The highest one this year being Irving Township. That doesn't mean that they had the most additional value added, it's just their percent change in taxable value. I do the same thing for 5 years on page 9, just so we can get a trend analysis. And then on page 11, I do a comparison over 10 years. So in that 10 years, the 10-year average percent change was 8.44% in equalized value every year, and 5.3% in taxable value every year. Again, that doesn't mean tax revenues increase by 5% every year. That's just the average percent change in taxable value. So everybody is fairly consistent in taxable value change, between 5 and 6% over the last decade. We have some slower growth in Woodland and Maple Grove townships, and that's most likely just because that's primarily agricultural property, which is protected from uncapping. So that's probably the reason there. And if I'm going too fast, you can stop me at any time. I'm going to skip pages 13 and 14 and go to page 15 because that summarizes all the graphs. And what this graph shows on page 15 is the trend and gap between equalized and taxable value. So what this is, it's a picture of Proposal A that passed in 1994. That blue line represents property value increases, and yep, go ahead.
Ours is in black and white, so is it the
Oh,
upper or lower line?
yes, sorry, the top line is
Top
blue.
line. Okay,
So, just imagine it.
yes.
So the top line is equalized value increases, starting in 2012. And you can see that that gap has increased significantly over the last couple of years. Prior to Proposal A, that top line is what we would have been collecting taxes on. And so now we are capped at that bottom line, and that's because of Proposal A. So you can see that Proposal A has done its job as far as protecting taxpayers in the way it was intended. And then pages 16 through 32 are just county equalized values and trends broken down by each township. So I'm going to skip over those because those are primarily for townships. On page 33 starts the list of all units by classification. And so this is helpful to see where, for example, on page 33, this is agricultural property. So we can see that the majority of agricultural value can be found in Woodland Township. And so that's just good information to have. I do that for commercial, industrial, and so you can see industrial On page 35, we have the majority of industrial value in Thornapple, City of Hastings, and then also in Woodland Township, and that's because of Carbon Green Bioenergy there in the corner of our county. And then for residential property on page 36, you can see that the majority of our residential value is found in Yankee Springs and Thornapple Township, which makes sense. There's a lot of lake property over in Yankee Springs, so property values tend to be higher. In Thornapple Township, there's been a lot of growth, so there's a lot of residential value focus there. Then I also break down average values per parcel for each of the classification. This is helpful when we are looking at just property trends throughout the county. Also, if there's a millage that a school district or a county or a township is looking at renewing, they will use this information to see how it might affect the average taxpayer. So I do that for both assessed value and taxable value. Let's see, on page 41, just for some interesting information, try to keep it exciting. On page 41, last year's average value per parcel in Berry County for residential property was $233,000. This year it's $266,000. And then on page 45, the average taxable value per parcel was $87,000 this year for 2024 compared to last year, $80,000. So definitely some growth. On page 46 starts our top taxpayers report. This is actually an important report that is used and requested many times throughout the year by various lenders. Specifically, if they're looking to do bond ratings, they use these reports to see how stable our tax base is. And so that's why this information is included in here. Consumers Energy and Bradford White continue to be the county's top taxpayers. And then on pages 48 to 63, it's all the same information that we just went over. It's just broken down differently for the school districts. So those reports are typically used by the school districts and various reporting that they need to do for the state. And then I also include special information for special acts, including industrial facilities and DNR. Those are not considered ad valorem. Ad valorem means at value. That means that we don't tax them at the same rates as the rest of the properties, so they're not included in equalization, but they're here for budget information. And then last is Form L4024, and this is the report that summarizes all the information in here and that I'm recommending that you guys approve, and that has to be certified by the Board of Commissioners.
Questions for Mashaya? Amazing report. I mean, there's numbers upon numbers. I can see that this is a masterpiece of information to study, but I've never seen it broken down in such detail. So I really appreciate the work and effort that goes into it. So when I look at page 11, Berry County percentage of change in SEV and taxable from 2015 to 2024. And you show Castleton Township, change in equalized 100.54, Irving and Orangeville all over 100%. Yankee Springs at 99.93, Hastings at 91. Is that an indication of growth, real estate values in those areas?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So that is where the growth in the county is primarily taking place, easily.
Oh, yes, easily residential. And I mean, and you can look at that just by looking at homes that have recently sold multiple times in the last decade. My home, for example, when we bought it, had doubled compared to when it was purchased in 2012. So, yeah, and that's not just in Berry County. I think that's just happening through a lot of different places in Michigan that are growing.
Okay. And when you look at like Castleton at 100.54, but then you go over to taxable where it's 47.04, that just tells you how Prop A
Yep.
is
Correct.
reducing the taxable amount.
Correct.
Okay. Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Very interesting.
Can I ask
Go
a
ahead,
question?
Mike.
Yeah, so on that same subject, the 10-year average change, this is the same page 11, taxable value 5.3%. So people didn't, that's, would be a big jump from year to year, but this is like, there's also new building in there and such?
Correct,
Okay.
correct. That includes all the additions and new construction, yes.
Because, like, what was the limits, if you were living in the same house, and how much your taxes went up? Actual taxes?
So the actual taxes, that's different than taxable value. So the limit on taxable value is, the increase is limited to the rate of inflation, or 5%, whichever is less, unless there's new construction or unless a property transfers ownership. The actual taxes can go up because of changes in millage rates, and so that may increase somebody's tax bill by higher than the rate of inflation. So there's not a limit, but they do have to be approved by the voters.
Not just millage rates, but don't they go up by the assessed value, or the value of the home increasing?
No. So the assessed value can go up by any rate.
Okay, I get it. So the difference here is we're talking about rate, which I get. I was just thinking about our actual taxes, what we have to write a check for.
Okay, yes.
So what is that been going up by?
It's different. There's 47 different taxing entities in different school districts, and so different in ISDs and KRESAs in the county, and so sometimes those millages increase by higher, so it really depends on where you live. For example, Kalamazoo County in the KRESA, they've had really high increases in their KRESA millage rates in the last couple of years, so people living in those districts in Berry County probably seen a much higher increase. It really depends on where you live and who's collecting taxes.
Do you ever do any kind of report on that or include that in the report? I would like to see that number.
Yeah, when we do apportionment, I can collect some of that data. Apportionment occurs in October, so I have to wait until I get all the tax rate requests in October. But I can start compiling that information, absolutely.
Yeah, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Commissioner Tennyson.
Michelle, you want to speak a little bit on when a property comes uncapped, when somebody purchases it, like if somebody owned it for 30 years and they're only paying $2,000 a year in
Yeah.
property tax, and all of a sudden, like you mentioned, your
Yes.
home. You
Yes.
want to speak on that?
Yes,
Because a lot of people don't understand.
I'll use me
how
for
that
an
works.
example. I bought my house in 2021. So prior to when I purchased my house, I think the taxes were about $2,000. And then when I purchased my house in the city of Hastings, what happens is the year after you purchase it, the taxable value becomes uncapped and becomes equal to whatever the assessed value is that year. And so when somebody buys a house, a lot of times on the listing, it'll say, oh, the taxes are only $2,000, but when you purchase the house, they don't take into account that uncapping. And so someone like me might see the property taxes go from $2,000 to about $5,500 in 1 year, which is a huge increase. And it's why it's really important if somebody's looking to buy a house that they should call their assessor or even our office to get an actual estimate on property taxes. Because a lot of times the realtors or even mortgage companies don't take that uncapping into consideration when they're looking at monthly mortgage payments. So, is that kind of what you wanted to mention?
It does, but it's a big deal to people. All of a
Yes.
sudden go from an escrow that was set up here, and all of a sudden they got to put another $3,000 in their escrow account.
Yep, and the big thing with escrow companies is that they're behind a year, so so most people don't get that surprise for another 2 years after they purchase the property, and now it's jumping up to what it's going to be, plus they're catching up for everything that they were short in their escrow for the prior year. So that's usually when assessors or even our office get the most frustrated phone calls, and we do our best to try to make sure that realtors are giving proper information, but we can only do so much, so.
Yeah, I don't think most people are educated on that, that they look at the tax when it shows on, when you're buying it, and they don't realize that it's going to come uncapped to what they were paying, and then they're going to pay the full boat. And
Right.
it's going to be a big shock to them.
Right, and with the rate that property values are increasing from year to year, I mean, this year was 12%, so even if we provided an estimate, it would probably be higher than the estimate we provide this year when it becomes uncapped the following year. So,
Additional questions from commissioners before we take a question from our studio audience? Gary?
Me and Michelle had a conversation last week, I said, I stopped in her office. But the taxable value and assessed value, my taxable value is going up also. So that is a problem. Now, if you're in a different area, your taxable value can go up to where it's gonna cost you more money than mine because I've been there for 36 years. So there can be large increases in just taxable value also. So that's one of those things that, if that helps your question out, that's still moving, it's still moving up majority of the time. I'm not thinking many went down.
no.
Maybe
mostly
a
no.
couple, but then they're probably deteriorated. So I just want to make that statement. The taxable value is going up on most properties in Berry County also.
Yeah, and just to further add to that, it does make, Commissioner Carlton, it does make your question a little bit more difficult because it's hard to say, how much of a percent increase somebody's taxes went up, because also there's properties that have uncapped. So in those cases, so I'll do my best to get that information for you in general, but it won't probably include considerations for uncappings.
Thank you.
Everybody saw 5% in the county this year, though,
In their taxable value,
in their
yes.
taxable value. That was the minimum versus inflation, so.
Yeah, inflation was actually 5.1%, and so the law says 5%, and rate of inflation or 5%, whichever is lesser, so it was actually 5% again this year. Similar to last year, inflation was 7.9%, and so we could only increase taxable values by 5%.
Okay. Commissioners, any other questions? Okay, the chair would entertain a motion to recommend to the Board of Commissioners adoption of Resolution 24-08, a resolution to approve 2024 county equalization values and authorize certification of L-4024.
So moved, Oster.
Second.
Motion by Doster, support by Tunison, to recommend to the Board of Commissioners adoption of Resolution 24-08, a resolution to approve the 2024 county equalization values and to authorize certification of the L-4024. Additional discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Ms. Shai. Great information. And a lot of it. Matt Ward. Good morning, Matt.
Morning. I'd like to thank the board for the chance to come up and speak on this. I'm at about 8 months out from taking over in the IT department, and I just kind of want to bring you guys up to speed on a few things. We have completed a few projects that the board approved. We've moved forward and resolved the jail camera server that was approved last year in October, where the installation wrapped up last month, and spoke to the corrections officers yesterday and the lieutenant. They are very happy with the results of that, so we appreciate the board's assistance with getting that done and modernizing that. In the last few months, we've identified a number of key concerns related to end-of-life technologies or things that we have as a county need to address. So we brought a couple of them up to you today.
Matt, can
Yes.
you get a little closer
Yep,
to the
sure.
microphone?
Just trying not to
Otherwise, we're going
yell in
hear
it.
From the Commodore of the yacht club.
There we go. Sorry, not familiar with the yacht, so. First request today is related to vulnerability scanning. Most of you probably heard in the news frequently software vulnerabilities that are reported and need to be addressed. This is a tool that we're seeking to request that the board approve for us to purchase to modernize how we handle those. We have many hundreds of computers, servers, pieces of equipment. They all have various different kinds of assorted software on them. Occasionally, a software programmer will neglect to resolve something the way that they should, and a vulnerability is discovered and needs to be mitigated. This software tool is something that allows us to automate that process significantly. Right now, we have an individual whose job it is to look over these vulnerabilities, try to find out which computers are affected, manually, in some cases, apply remediations to them, which the more human error there is in any process, the more likely it is that somebody misses something important. This request for this, it's a little bit of an imprecise request because there is some currency exchange there. The company itself that produces the software is European, so they quote in euros. So it's roughly $11,235, subject to whatever rate we would get on our credit card purchases of the day. This tool would allow us to scan all 300 and I believe we have it quoted out at 350 machines, servers, and workstations that our users use. Look for those security vulnerabilities that may need to be addressed and allow us to automate the process of addressing them much faster than we can with our current staff at this rate. This is a commercial version of a tool that was previously used that had significantly less functionality and unfortunately has since become unavailable as in the free version that we were using it. So this is the best choice we have for the same tool. We looked at a couple of alternatives, and the closest alternative functionality-wise is cheaper in the first year, and then as we get into year 2 and 3, the option that we're proposing saves money over time, about half the price. So we'd like the board to consider that as an option for us to allow us to continue to mitigate these vulnerabilities with the staff that we have right now, as opposed to a more expensive option, which would be paying an outside company to do it in this case.
Okay. Matt, 350 machines, are the vulnerabilities being created by people within the organization, or is the vulnerabilities?
No, these are largely software-related vulnerabilities. Every week, we get notified about new discoveries that are found in existing software. As software receives patches as it goes forward, sometimes those patches institute or actually create other vulnerabilities while attempting to solve them. So these aren't really related to our users. These are more related to the underlying machines, software, and the technology that they use. And they're usually software-related in nature. The hardware ones are harder to fix. We ultimately end up replacing the hardware in those cases generally because it's not viable to alter hardware after the fact if it's actually built into the equipment itself.
So most of the software is behind our firewall, but still vulnerabilities that are out there.
Yep.
So because the software companies don't do their job when they release this stuff, we have to spend $11,000 to cover our butt.
That's a pretty common number. Most counties that I've talked to are using some form of this tool, and there's a lot of different kinds of doing it. This is probably the most frugal method is a standalone tool like this that only tackles this one job that doesn't get rolled into. Software vendors like to sell you suites of products. If you were to imagine it the way when you purchase a vehicle, your car dealer would much rather sell you a vehicle with all of the options as opposed to just a basic vehicle. This is a basic vehicle. It does this job. That's all it does. There are a lot more tools out there that could add extra functionality in if we wanted to spend the money, but this is a way for us to get started on this process with an automated tool that will allow us to get our results faster and get some of the work off of our plate as opposed to having somebody manually go. For example, we have a vulnerability with Chrome that was released a few weeks ago. It affects 70 or 80 computers. Without a good patch or a good vulnerability remediation tool, we could be in a spot where we'd have to have our 4 staff go to every single one of those computers and manually run processes on that. Might take 3 to 5 minutes a machine times 60 machines, and you could end up spending your entire day doing nothing but that. Well, we still are getting other phone calls that need to be addressed. This is the type of tool that would allow us to identify all of those machines and push out the solutions to that all at once.
Thank you. Questions from commissioners?
What's the life expectancy of this, Matt? I mean, is it?
So this is a cost year over year. It's not there is a small piece of equipment that goes with it that is the $4,000 part of the quote. I'm sorry, the $6,000 part of the quote, and then year over year we pay the licensing, which is that $4,300 to $4,500, depending on how you do the currency subscription, basically. But that subscription keeps the tool itself updated. It gives us more information about new vulnerabilities that come out and allow us to continue to use the software. If at some point we found a different tool that we liked that was more cost-effective, we buy basically, there's not a huge value to be had in buying extended contracts. So a year contract, one at a time, would allow us to decide, if we decided this was not working the way we want it, we can go another direction instead.
That makes sense.
And some tax rules have changed that require us to track long multi-year contracts in a different way, so it's easier for us if we do year-to-year contracts, especially if there's no financial savings involved.
Okay.
Thank you.
Additional questions? Hearing none?
So you're saying that the quote is in euros?
The quote is in the packet at 10,385 euros. The conversion rate right now, when I checked, puts that at about $11,235.
Okay, and my concern is, do we want a foreign country involved in the Berry County computer system?
Well, I think it's important to note when we get involved with foreign countries that almost every system that we use, whether it's Microsoft or any other piece of software, has data centers in foreign countries, has headquarters and buildings in other countries. As recently as 2 weeks ago, the state of Michigan, for example, has a software package that our friend of the court offices use. The data centers that host the data that they utilize was in the Netherlands. So it came up on our firewall indicating that traffic is coming from the Netherlands. So it is a little bit difficult to say we only want a piece of software or a piece of hardware that only came from the United States, because most of these companies are multinational companies now. It's harder to identify somebody that only writes software, has no employees in another country. When we bring things up here, we try to choose industry leaders that provide software solutions, but we also are cognizant of the fact that at our size, we have to watch our budget. So there are other companies we could go with that may or may not cost more depending on what we buy from them.
Thank you. Good question, good answer. Additional questions? Hearing none, the chair would entertain a motion to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval of the attached quote for roughly $11,235, subject to currency conversion rates, to purchase Greenbone Vulnerability Management Tool and a one-year enterprise subscription for the purposes of scanning and remediating vulnerabilities in our servers and user endpoints.
So moved. Hatfield.
Support Campbell.
Motion by Hatfield, support by Campbell, to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval of the attached quote for roughly $11,235, subject to currency conversion rates, to purchase Greenbone Vulnerability Management Tool and a one-year enterprise subscription for the purposes of scanning and remediating vulnerabilities in our servers and user endpoints. Additional discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries.
Thank you. The other item that we brought today is a request for an expansion of a currently existing system. Right now, we use a tool from Dell to back up our key servers and data. This tool was purchased with roughly 24 terabytes of storage. When I took over in October, we were at 90% capacity on that system. In other words, we were almost entirely full. And 6 to 8 months later, we're sitting at about 95% of the storage space we have available for backing up things is full. So the quickest way we can solve that, with an eye towards the existing system that we have, is to purchase extra space from Dell. Dell, when they sell it to us initially, are kind enough to include the full amount of space with the tool that it could ever have, but they keep it behind a padlock in our basement over there. And if we were to purchase the extra space, they would be happy to open that up for us, but it is unfortunately, there is a significant charge involved with that. The two units themselves both have a 4 terabyte expansion available. They are both $11,414.13. So That would give us about 20% more storage space than we have right now for backing up vital things like equalizations, tax records, but also things like all of our courts and law data, all of the files in the prosecutors and sheriff's office departments that they use, and this gives us a backup copy of that in case something happens to a server, so that we can bring it back to life with the existing data that we have. If we were to run out of storage space, probably the next best option would be to reduce the amount of backups that we have, which we've done a little bit. That's how we got under 90%, got it down to about 85%, but we just generate a lot of data here, and this is the tool that they've purchased for having that backup copy there, that redundancy. So this would hopefully give us about another year of ability to back up everything that's being produced that we have deemed vital, and then we can look at long-term what direction we might want to go in after that. There may be other options out there, but I've talked to Michael a little bit about this. Part of the challenge right now is we need to implement something very soon, given the capacity that we're at. This would allow us to do that. It is expensive, unfortunately, but we're kind of locked into that system that we originally purchased, which had this expansion available. It was just never purchased previously by the past administration.
So 4 terabytes, almost $23,000.
Yes, it is unfortunate. It is, the nature of the way that those appliances work is they back the stuff up that we pre-select automatically, and then there's a secondary unit. Right now it's located off at another geographically distant facility. We use the basement of Central Dispatch, so if our building across the street had a fire or something like that, we could recover all of that backup data from another server. The disaster recovery too is almost entirely full, so we're in a spot there where we can cut down the amount of backups that we have, but the concern with that you run into is if you get some kind of a issue that causes a problem that we don't know about today, you don't want to run with only one backup from yesterday, for example, because if that backup also has the problem that we don't know about it, then we can't go back before when the issue occurred. So we like to have as much range as is reasonable. We're backing up several times a week, and then we're backing those up and keeping monthly copies of those, and we have copies back to 2 years. We've gotten rid of some of the oldest ones to give ourselves a little bit more breathing room, but you don't want to start getting to the point where you only have a backup from a couple weeks if there's a longer term issue that we might run into.
Okay, that was my question, is how long are we keeping these backups for? That
Yeah, there's an automated scale. We can dial it down, but we run the risk if we dial it down too far, like I said, of running into that kind of an issue where there's been some kind of a problem with our data. It's existed for example, 2 months, and we only have a copy from this month. At that point, you would have data that's not usable anymore potentially. So we do keep that longer. We've tried to kind of go with the best practice of retention and try not to keep 10 years worth of data, for example. But we are going to have this conversation probably, if you approve this, this gives us a year, but we're probably going to come back to you within a year or perhaps put it into the next budget about what are we going to do long term, and that's a conversation. We've kind of approached a lot of things in the last 8 months with an eye towards what do we have to solve today, and then once we get that breathing room, what can we work on going forward so that we can get ahead of these things. I don't like coming up here and bringing these to you in an emergency capacity. I would much rather get into the spot where we can look at these things as life cycles of, this is a solution that lasts us 5 years, and by 2.5 years, we need to be thinking about what the next solution's going to be. Unfortunately, given the state of things right now, we're kind of moving up here with more items than I'd like to be, unfortunately.
okay. Michael, data processing fund, I'm sure has a good balance in it. No issues there.
Yep, we're okay.
That's what that fund is for. So, questions from commissioners? Commissioner Timmison?
Well, does it make more sense to think long-term now, or does it make more sense to do the 1 year and then go from there?
It's a tough question to answer, because as long as nothing goes wrong, it makes more sense to think about it long-term. But we, unfortunately, and I don't want to I want to be as diplomatic as possible and say that, some of these things we can, if we have the opportunity of time on our side, we get the opportunity to make what I would think to be the best decision, right? Right now, because we're so close, we're a matter of days or weeks before we run out of room to work with it. So I would rather not do this. I'd rather find the long-term solution, but I also don't want to be in a spot where I have to come back to you and tell you, hey, we can't do what I consider to be a pretty vital part of what we're here for, so.
Well, then, if we do this today, then you better be coming up with a plan pretty soon, right?
Yep, that's the goal, right? Like I said, we deal with most of these problems when we approach them as a department. We try to look at what do we do about it today? And then what do we do next so that we don't end up back in this conversation again, right? And, why we're at 90% in October when I got here, I can't tell you. That doesn't seem like I would want my car to be 90% out of gasoline before I go on a road trip. But unfortunately, that's where we are at. So we have to work with the situation that I've got right now.
Okay. Additional questions? Commissioner Getty?
So I'll admit that I don't know a lot about technology, but in some of these conversations, especially in townships that I've been involved in, they talk about moving from a hardware server to a cloud-based backup system.
Yep, there are options out there. The more data that we have, the more costly it is. I don't have a number for you right now. When I've looked recently at some systems that the prosecutor is looking at, they're paying something in the neighborhood for government cloud storage of about $500, or being proposed that their cost would be about $500 a terabyte per year, but that's no appliances, that's just the storage space for the government cloud. So for them to take a 20 terabyte server and back it up, it's almost $10,000 a year. At the end of which they have nothing. They just have that storage space. And if they utilize it all and they need to buy more, they have to buy more.
Right.
So cloud storage is definitely an option. There are other companies besides Dell that are in this market. The challenge, I think, in this situation, as I've mentioned to Commissioner Tunison, is the time factor that we have. We don't have a lot of time to work with. So going forward, it might be possible for us to find an alternative vendor that isn't as costly. This storage, once it's purchased, doesn't go away. There is an annual, or there's a service agreement. It's a 3-year service agreement. So this will boost the cost of our 3-year service agreement if we can decide to continue to renew and use the system with Dell going forward. But we could ultimately, in 3 years, be in an entirely different spot where we found another vendor that we like altogether, and then we would be done using Dell for this service.
Thank you.
Okay. Additional questions? Hearing none, the chair would entertain a motion to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval of the attached quote for $22,828.26 to grant access to an additional 4 terabyte of disaster recovery storage within our Dell EMC IDPA storage array.
So moved. Hatfield.
Go ahead, John.
Motion by Hatfield, support by Smelker, to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval of the attached quote for $22,828.26 to grant access to an additional 4 terabyte of disaster recovery storage within our Dell EMC IDPA storage array. Additional discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Need a break, or are we okay?
Yeah, let's take one.
Break? Okay, it's 9:59. We will recess for 5 to 7 minutes.
I always hated this time.
We're trying to guess it right, and then we guess it right.
Yeah, no, it's
Whether you like this Second Amendment thing or not.
Yeah,
It's going to. It's just You vote no, and I think it would, but you are who you are. If you're not yourself, who are you?
I got it. Call the cops.
Well, they're probably the ones who did it. You know what it was?
Gotta find it.
All right, the board will come back in session. Next up, Michael Brown.
Well, I'm just here to watch the wheels turn.
And Brian.
Good morning.
Good morning.
This is a, get to a request real quick. A request to approve Resolution 24-07, which is a resolution that would abolish the office of the county surveyor. Sorry, thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you for not throwing something at me too, Rick. So anyways, I'll repeat that. I'll repeat that. So this is a request to approve Resolution 24-07, which is a resolution to abolish the office of the county surveyor. I'm going to, for lack of a better term, tee this one up, and then I'm going to turn it over to our county surveyor, Brian Reynolds. He and I have talked about this for some time. It's been predicated on whether he continues to run or not. But we do have an office of the county surveyor. We're one of very few. I don't know, Brian, if you know how many others specifically do have a county surveyor, but I don't think that there are many counties anymore.
Well, it's fewer than half of the 83 counties. Of our neighboring counties, Calhoun, Eaton, Ionia, and Kent have all done away with the office. On the other hand, there's quite a number of counties to the south and west, Allegan, Berrien, Cass, Kalamazoo, and all across the southern tier. Those counties still have the county surveyor as an elected office. It is something of an anachronism. The office of county surveyor was a meaningful office in the 19th century, and in the 20th century it became less and less meaningful as the century progressed. And quite honestly, for the past 100 plus years, if it weren't for the remonumentation program, the county surveyor would have nothing to do. And so the remonumentation program that was Act 345 of 1990, and the remonumentation program began in earnest January 1st of 1992. The Act 345 says that for those counties that have a county surveyor, that person shall be the county representative for the remonumentation program. And for those counties that do not have a county surveyor, it becomes an appointed contract position to do what is the technical administration of the remonumentation program. So if you choose to eliminate the Office of County Surveyor, that doesn't mean that there won't be somebody to administer the program. It just becomes an appointed position, not an elected position. There's an advantage to the county in that with an elected position, of course, the person is required to be a resident of the county. With an appointed county representative, that can be any licensed surveyor in the state of Michigan. In preparation for our discussion today, I did talk with other surveyors who live in Berry County, and that's a very, very limited number of people. There's in fact, both of the surveyors, there's really only two, that would be eligible who would make sense. In other words, yes, there are other surveyors. Some of them are a good bit older than me, and so they would not be good candidates. But the two surveyors who could possibly run for the office, I talked with both of them, and one of them flat out said, no, I'm not interested in that. The other said that yes, he would be interested. It's not something that he was motivated for, but if you choose not to eliminate the Office of County Surveyor, he would be a willing candidate. He's a good surveyor. He would be a good person to carry on the remonumentation program, and he's in the middle of his career. And so I've been in this position for 32 years now. And he's young enough where you could probably get 30 years of service from him if you chose to do it that way. So you do have an option. You know, if you choose not to eliminate the county surveyor position, there is somebody that's willing to do it. On the other hand, I think it probably makes more sense to just go ahead and abolish the office and move on to an appointed county rep.
Okay. Interesting. Thank you for that input. Questions from commissioners?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is there going to be a big difference, you think, in costs to the county?
Probably. You know, I would think that the contract position will probably be less costly, yes.
Thank you.
Well, basically, on what you're saying, Brian, is that even the person you're talking about, we could just appoint him versus if he were a representative of
Yes.
the certain, right?
Yes, that is
Wouldn't
true,
necessarily
yes.
have to be an elected position.
That is true, yes.
Yeah, that's correct. That becomes the, for lack of a better term, the convenience of the issue. While we had Brian, we knew that he would continue to run, and he has the history. But the worry is that going forward, will you be able to find a candidate? And we didn't want to put the board in a spot where you got past the filing deadline, you didn't have somebody who ran, and then now what do you do? You have to appoint, and you struggle to appoint. If you've only got one candidate out there that's, for lack of a better term, mildly interested, that doesn't leave you a lot of options. If midterm that individual decides he or she isn't interested or wasn't what they thought or the like. And with the appointment process, you now forego the whole issue of if it's having to hold a special election of some type. There's just a lot of legal complexities, if you may, that go away with the appointment, particularly as we look at, and with Brian indicating that the position, the function of the position has significantly changed toward the remonumentation. Everything associated with remonumentation, now you make those appointments. So it seems to provide more flexibility in my estimation for the board going forward.
That was my thought as well, that if we abolish the office, it seems like we should be able to work on collaboration with Kent, Ionia, Calhoun, some neighboring counties potentially, who are also doing the same thing, and either hire the same individual or someone familiar with this to work in it. Maybe it'll save us some money in the long run, but somebody familiar with the process of remonumentation. So it gives us a little bit more free, as far as just being able to work, appoint, whatever the case is.
Yeah.
So I don't want to put you on the spot, Brian. Are you done? Or if we decide to abolish the office, we don't want to hurt your feelings, but are you willing to consider being our appointed rep at this point, or is that a conversation we need to have in the future?
The answer to that is yes, I am, okay? I'm willing to take on a one-year obligation, but I'm not willing to take on a 4-year obligation.
Okay. Because it would be great to have your expertise and information as far as training or working with somebody coming into that position going forward. So if you'd be willing to stay with us, I think that's a very good trade-off, to have your expertise and institutional knowledge to help us transition into that new position. So that's a win-win.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Additional questions?
No, just thanks for all your service, Brian. Really appreciate you.
Yeah, I would just say that Brian has been an icon in Berry County, and we've been really fortunate to have him for as long as we have, and appreciate his willingness to kind of help us during that transition to a different structure.
Okay.
I would just make one other comment real quickly. This does not take and will not take effect until January 1 of 2025. So this does not affect the current term at all. It only affects then it will eliminate then the term beginning in 2025.
Okay.
So Brian will remain until then.
Questions from our audience?
Do the appointed people have to have the same credentials?
The requirement is that the short answer is yes, okay? For county surveyor, it's one of only 2 offices that require a professional license, I think. For a prosecutor has to be an attorney, and the county surveyor is required to be a licensed surveyor. For the county representative, an appointed county representative must be a licensed surveyor.
Okay. Thank you. Additional questions from commissioners? Hearing none. We do have a resolution. Do you need me to read that resolution as well, or have you all got a chance to read through it in your board packet? Okay. All right, you've all read it. The chair would entertain a motion to recommend to the Board of Commissioners adoption of Resolution 24-07, a resolution to abolish the office of county surveyor.
So moved. Doster.
Support Colton.
Motion by Doster, support by Colton. To recommend to the Board of Commissioners adoption of Resolution 24-07, a resolution to abolish the office of county surveyor. Additional discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion carries. Thank you, Brian. We appreciate your many years of service and leading us forward on our new path here, so.
Very good, thank you.
Next up, a resolution to affirm the board supported the Constitution and Second Amendment. Commissioners Colton, Tunison, and Smelker. Commissioner Colton, would you like to lead on this?
Yes, this has been an issue that's been around since last summer, and it's certainly not been like one of those things that is going to be an 8-0 vote by the commissioners. It's somewhat controversial. What we're looking at today is what I've seen is a seventh version of this resolution coming from one place or another. I think this version has something in it for everyone, and probably something that everyone doesn't like, but that's what a compromise is. So I think it's a great compromise. In the state, there's 83 counties, and John Lake, is it 55 that have? 55 counties have either a sanctuary county resolution, a Second Amendment resolution, or a constitutional resolution. This is a constitutional and Second Amendment resolution that will put us in that group. After us, it will be 56 of the 83 counties will have this. I think it's ready today. The last time we looked at this, I thought it would be a 4-4 at the best, 5-3 vote. Now I think it's going to be a 7-1 or 6-2 vote. I think it's time to pull the trigger.
Okay. Commissioner Smelker.
I like some of the statements that Dar made on getting the wording exactly right. But on this, I supported the first resolution that we brought up, but I will support this one if we make the small amendments.
Okay. Commissioner Tennyson?
We put a lot of time and thought into this. I mean, I think all of us have. All of us sitting here put a lot of time and thought into it. And Mike, John, and I spent a lot of time together thinking about this, how to make this right. And I think we're about the best version we're going to be able to get right now.
Okay. Questions or comments from commissioners? Mr. Doster.
To begin with, you've made substantial changes to the thing just during today's board meeting. The public does not know what those are. I do not know what those are. This is very premature to be coming before the board. This thing should be put off, and whatever version that you all have determined that you want to support needs to be printed in our agenda so that the people in the county has an opportunity to come and speak on this. If you go and change something on the spot here, you're robbing them of their First Amendment rights.
I think it's not a substantial change from what we've got written here. It's a little bit of wordsmithing. In the 1, 2, third paragraph down, we're going to take the sheriff's suggestion to change the term constitutional rights to natural rights of the people protected by the Constitution. I don't consider that a substantial change.
I do. Would you like, we all have the copy in our packet of the resolution. Are there proposed changes that you want to make to that resolution today?
Just what I've just mentioned.
Just that one?
So, yeah, go 1, 2, third down, second line, change constitution, null to natural, and then rights of the people, and then protected by the Constitution. That's the change proposed.
I would support that small change.
And we can read it as it is, and then we can make amendments if we need to.
And it will be written for the BOC, right?
It will be written in the modified form for the BOC. For the...
It don't happen often, but I do agree with Mark that it's got to be in the written form, the way we need it. So that
Next
people can
week.
see it.
Next week, right? Yeah.
So the question is, do we want to table it, make the changes, and bring it back next week? Do you want to put it up, do you want to read the resolution in its entirety as you've made those amendments? Or the amendment?
Sorry, that's my blood sugar. I think you knocked it out of the ballpark here.
I think it was the candy, it was, you know.
Yeah, I got one of these things.
Ah, okay.
I don't need to be carted out yet, but I think we could finish this.
So if you would like to read the resolution with its amendments in its entirety, so everybody's on the same page.
Okay.
Do you
Catherine?
want me to read it?
Yes.
I will make the motion then and read my motion to approve the resolution as amended as I'm reading it. So this is a resolution affirming the board's support of the Constitution and the Second Amendment. Whereas the commissioners of Berry County took an oath to support the United States Constitution, including the Second Amendment and Article 1, Section 6 of the State of Michigan Constitution that provides every person has a right to keep and bear arms for defense of himself and the state. And whereas all elected officials in Berry County, including the sheriff and prosecuting attorney, took the same oath of office and swore to support the same Constitution with amendments and faithfully discharge the duties of their respected offices. Whereas the Berry County Board of Commissioners is opposed to any legislation that will infringe upon the natural rights of the people protected by the Constitution, and whereas the Second Amendment of the Constitution of the United States affirms that it is the natural right of the people to keep and bear arms and protects Americans against any infringement of this right. Now therefore be it resolved that the Berry County Board of Commissioners declares their support for the United States Constitution and Second Amendment rights of all Berry County citizens as protected by both the United States Constitution and Article 1, Section 6 of the State of Michigan Constitution, and pledge their support to uphold the rights of all citizens in Berry County. Be it further resolved, the Berry County Board of Commissioners commends all county elected officials for also honoring their pledge to support the United States Constitution and the Second Amendment and all amendments thereto.
Thank you.
Second. Was that a
That was a motion.
second?
Okay, motion by Getty, supported by Colton. Is there additional discussion on the motion?
Yes.
Okay.
First of all, this resolution, it sounds to me like it's more of a paraphrase of the U.S. Constitution with this, every person has a right to a gun, to bear arms. The U.S. Constitution talks about the state militias having the right. It had, if you go to original constitutional intent, the framers had a very limited idea of what that right would be. The only gun that was in usage at the time was a muzzle loader. The world has changed dramatically. Now, the courts have enlarged that interpretation over time, but the Constitution itself does not give an individual right to bear arms. This talk of how this Constitution, I mean, that goes to how this perception that the Second Amendment is so under siege. The Second Amendment has probably been broadened more than any other constitutional amendment, and how we couldn't possibly have any other constitutional amendments without the Second Amendment. The First Amendment, the right to think and to speak, is fundamental in our government. If we didn't have that, there would be no guns. The First Amendment was enshrined by the Greeks in 600 BC. It's one of the oldest foundations of the law. The Fifth Amendment, due process. Without due process, the government could run completely ramshod over us all. There would be no point in having a Second Amendment without the Fifth Amendment. The Sixth Amendment, the right to trials and to know what you're being accused of. Without that, people could be thrown in prison for no reason whatsoever, held naked and tortured for the rest of their lives. The Second Amendment would not come into play at all. Guns are a fairly new mechanism in world history. They weren't even invented until the later 1300s. This idea that somehow we need to protect this and hold it above every other constitutional amendment is, I don't believe, is true. These others are of much more importance. Then we have, the problem is that this is completely symbolic. We have no way to enforce this. Now, the thing is, well, this is what's scary, is that it's not symbolic to the people who are pushing this. They believe that if we pass this, our sheriff we will be winking and nudging to the sheriff that he does not have to enforce gun laws that he determines infringe on this right. He sat here right today and said that he would, as an example, that he had witnessed felonies being committed in front of him that he did not charge because he didn't believe that in that particular gun law. This is going to encourage that kind of behavior. Our prosecutor came and said that you cannot exclude laws from Berry County. They have to be enforced. It has to go to a trial. If the jury determines that there is not a case for a crime, then they are acquitted. But there is a process for that. I think this is such a dangerous thing. And not only that, but we're going to have, you've seen our mailboxes of resolutions from everything in the world. How are we going to sit here and say, oh, well, we don't deal with that because you're doing a symbolic resolution right here. You're opening the floodgates. The next resolution before us will be to save butterflies from the grills of cars. I mean, they are lots of ridiculous, you came up with a couple examples of what you thought were ridiculous resolutions at the state level of announcing this day for chiropractor day or.
That's a good resolution. There are others that are ridiculous.
So I plan to vote against it.
Okay. Thank you for those comments. Commissioner Tennyson?
This is not symbolic to responsible gun owners, okay? The Second Amendment being under attack, and it will be under attack, okay? So it might be symbolic, but it's sending a message to the state of Michigan that 56 counties don't want the Second Amendment rights taken away or infringed upon. So that, it might be symbolic in paper, but it's not symbolic in the message. So that's my point of it.
Additional questions or comments from commissioners?
I guess I have a comment. I think there's about 4 of us sitting around there that have took an oath and being in the military. And I can tell you, when my country called upon me to go, they shoved a loaded weapon in my hand and sent me to a foreign country in a bunker and said the enemy could be here in a short time. But when I get back to this country, they try to take that right away from me, and I don't like it.
Okay. If there's no discussion, motion by Getty, support by Colton, to recommend to the Board of Commissioners adoption of Resolution 24-09 affirming the board's support of the Constitution and Second Amendment. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye. Nay.
Thank you. The motion is approved. I'm sure we'll have more discussion on this next week. Limited public comment. At this time, any member of the public wishing to address the board may do so for up to 3 minutes.
Good afternoon, or good morning. Mark Nopum, Castleton Township. I'm going to change the subject for Second Amendment real quick, something else. I'm here to announce I am running for sheriff. I have already filed. I have the utmost respect for Sheriff Leaf. One of the reasons I'm doing this, a little bit about myself, since I was in school, I've always wanted to do this. This isn't something that I just didn't like what somebody was doing, so now I'm gonna run. I'd also like to let everybody know, I only have a short amount of time, so I'm trying to get everything in, so I'm probably gonna talk a little fast. I'd love to have as the sheriff, I'd love to have an awesome working relationship with everybody. The commissioners, the prosecutor, the county clerks, township clerks, all of them. Some of my foundations that I'll be running on is transparency. I'd love to have some type of platform where body cam videos and things get posted of what the sheriff's office is doing before anybody can even FOIA it. I want everything out and open. Accountability, good or bad, it needs to be out there and the public needs to know what's going on. The Second Amendment Constitution, like you're talking about here today, is huge. The Fourth Amendment is huge, search and seizures. I don't know how many times in my career I have seen people's Fourth Amendment rights get violated by officers. And it's not here. Don't take that. But I've seen it happen, and I wasn't good with it. And when you go and you say something about it and go against the grain, you're not looked upon very, very happily by your fellow officers. Community policing is huge to me, and integrity is huge to me. And that all kind of goes along with the transparency at the same time. A little bit about myself. I grew up here, I was raised here. Went to St. Rose, went to Maple Valley. Left here when I was early 20s, went to South Carolina for about 20 years, and I came back. My heart's always been here. When I got married in 2019, through a lot of praying and conversation with my wife, who was from down south, she was willing to move up here for me to be where I wanted to be. That's one of the greatest things I could ever ask from her. So, and I thank you guys for listening to me today and giving me a chance to talk in front of you.
Absolutely. Nice to meet you. Thank you. Additional public comment?
Gary White, thank you. Thanks to Mickey Bennett today for hearing that euros was being spent. Based on that, I think I got a comment. It appears to me paper ballots are the only way to ensure no foreign influence is on our elections. So once again, the information handed, it all depends on how you listen to it. I also received my FOIA request back, and it appears 7 commissioners had no communication of the statement that was read on your behalf. It was only sent to, it was authored and sent to your chairman, who had the responsibility to put it on the agenda. In my opinion, not just make a blanket statement for the county commissioners, and it was your responsibility to say, we didn't vote on that, and I didn't say it. Because part of that in there, it said that the sheriff is on his own. The sheriff is elected for Berry County residents, is bonded by the county, unless you pulled that bonding away. So that was pretty sort of amazing to me. On Thursday, at the Berry County Republican Party, I got the 2019 to 2024 Berry County General Fund revenues, and I focused on tax collections. I also got a copy of the 2021 to 2026, which gave me an opportunity to do some comparables. Now, don't take this as bad, but when your comparables are off this upcoming year from 2021 November approval, I believe is when it was approved, of $13,996,786, then your requested to this year is $15,037,000. You got $1 million that was not projected back then. You can go back to 13, projection was $13,589,000. You collected $14,387,000. So you're collecting, that was an extra $700,000. Back in June of '21, 4 commissioners were here and 4 weren't. How does that work? I don't remember, but I said it was 7-3. I put a proposal out there to build a jail without a millage. It looks like my thought was it could be done without coming to the taxpayers. I know Mike Carlton in the election, he said, oh, we need to have a millage and the sheriff needs to have it. Dave Jackson, as commissioner, when he sat over here, said, we need to have a millage for a jail. If you look at your projection, you're going to add another $700,000 compounding into tax revenues by tax collections, property tax collections, and the following year is another $700,000. You can also see that, I'm going to finish up here if you would please, that the projections are always low as compared to the revenues. So it's $700,000 the next couple of years is probably going to be low. It's time we quit taxing people out of their homes. Start using the money for what's needed and not just other projects and programs. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional public comment?
Morning, John Lake, Irving Township. Been a journey. Started last March. Actually, it started in February for some of us, but I thank you guys for your time, your diligence in getting this passed. Well, passed out of the Cal. Good news is my retirees golf league starts in 2 weeks, so I'll take my frustrations elsewhere. But again, thank you. It's not what we originally put forth. It's something. And to minimize what 55 counties have done, and not only that, 61% of all counties in the United States is kind of disingenuous. Second Amendment's pretty well stated. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Talks about the militia. The militia is us. The militia is everybody that is 18 years of age and older. They don't have the right, they have the duty to take up arms against a tyrannical government. When our forefathers wrote this, it wasn't for sporting clays or long-range shooting, pistol competition. It was because they just came out of a pretty nasty war, and they earned their rights. So they weren't talking about AR-15s or whatever the case was. But when they talk about this, in terms of arms, they're talking about anything that was afforded to the military to combat this tyrannical government. So this is very big, right? Commissioner Doster points. It's symbolic, you can call it that, it's a statement. And I say it often. If you don't stand for something, you stand for nothing. By doing nothing, you are complicit. Our rights are being taken away left and right. We're making a statement, and I thank you for that.
Thank you. Additional public comment?
Bad news, my golf league's on Monday, so I'll still be here. First off, I'm not going to embellish what John said at all, but I do want to thank you, the board, for, and I'm going to use the word fortitude, finally have the fortitude to push this forward to the BOC so we can have an up or down vote on it, which I think is critical. Secondarily, I think you should read the board rules, Article 5, Section D, about time limitations for speaking on commissioners. That might come in handy at some time. And maybe we can put the clock up on occasion, whenever you feel it's necessary. Thirdly, don't ever tell me how I feel about a resolution impacting on that. You haven't talked to me about it, you don't know. So thank you very much. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Good luck in that golf league. Additional public comment? Hearing none. Hearing none. Commissioner comments. Commissioner Doster?
I serve on the Gun Lake Improvement Board and is in charge of weed control for Gun Lake. and their 3-year assessment is coming to an end, and they will be going through the process of public hearings to renew that. Currently, the board had taken action to stop using copper sulfate as a means to control weeds, because that was very unpopular, and there's new research that copper can cause some additional problems. So we went to a more expensive treatment, but miraculously enough, we have more money left over this year than we have prior years. We actually have enough money left over for one more year's worth of treatment without taxing people. And so there's going to be a real question at the hearing whether how the people want to go forward with this, whether to play out the money that they have or to go forward, and for how long a period of time, something they should be aware of.
Is that a 3-year or a 5-year renewal?
It normally is a 5-year. This last one was a 3-year.
Okay. Yeah, I noticed that in talking with the weed control that we do on Long Lake, that copper sulfate is now a banned substance until after July 1st use because of the impacts on fish spawning. So it's probably a good step in their direction. Commissioner Colton?
Nothing.
Commissioner Getty?
Just want to make a comment on the general revenue and the tax collections that have been brought up, and want to make people aware that there is an application for a poverty exemption from property tax, and they should contact their local assessor to find out if they meet that poverty exemption level.
Thank you. Commissioner Snelker?
I'm good, thank you.
Commissioner Tennyson?
I'm good. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Campbell?
I'd just like to take a minute to thank John Lake for all his efforts on the 2A resolution, and the 3 commissioners that spent many, many hours working on this, realizing that we all don't get exactly what we want all the time, but I think everybody gained something by what we passed, or what we were moving on to the BOC.
Thank you. Commissioner Hatfield?
I'd just like to take a moment to talk about the fact that our community has lost another real icon in the passing of Dick Gross. Dick was a phenomenal leader, a very, very generous philanthropist, but really flew under the radar. Most people would have no idea just how much he gave and provided in leadership to this community. Because of him, we're blessed to have the Berry Community Foundation, but his philanthropy went well beyond the Community Foundation to touch many other nonprofits in our community. He was a very special person, and he will be missed. But when you couple his passing with the passing of Larry Baum, huge, huge losses, and they will be missed, and they should be remembered with a great deal of fondness and respect.
Absolutely, very good. Very good. Couple things. Thank you, Commissioner Colton, Commissioner Smelker, Commissioner Tunison, for working on the 2A resolution, for continuing to mold that as it went forward through several discussions and disagreements, and more discussions and disagreements. And how many versions? 7 versions. A lot of versions. So I appreciate your work, and Commissioner Getty coming in late to that conversation and having some very valuable input to that as well. I appreciate your thoughts on that. So thank you. Also, something that also is in the paper is from Woodland. John J. Smith, a 100-year-old veteran and Woodland resident, was a member of the Ghost Army during World War II. Just amazing. I didn't know we had, it's so hard to find a World War II vet let alone a hero in our own community like Woodland. 100 years old, so his paper was in the Banner. If you haven't got a chance to read it, that's a great article for a local hero and a local legend. So shout out to John Smith. I don't know if you know John, but we should meet him. That's definitely an honor to have somebody like that. When you read what they did in World War II, that's impressive stuff to have them right here in our county. So thank you all for coming. Enjoy the free car wash. Compliments of God. Hope you had a great Easter. And we will see you all soon. We are adjourned.